A closer look at Mithril, Cardano's trustless light wallet solution. Updates on the Vasil Hard Fork and the Cardano Africa rollout, and some Cardano conferences just around the corner. It's time for the weekly report. Welcome back to Woodland Pools. Today it's time for the weekly report, so let's do a quick stake pool update and we'll jump right in. So first we want to start off by saying a huge thank you and welcome to all of our newest delegators. We truly appreciate your support and we're so excited to be on this journey with you. And if you're a follower of the channel and you appreciate the work we do here and you haven't delegated yet, the best way to support the channel is to delegate to the ASPEN stake pool. Let's keep growing together. So the last week of the month means Cardano360. As always, we'll link all the chapters below so you can dig into them in detail if you want to take a closer look. But the first thing they opened up with that we wanted to make sure to look at together is a closer look at Mithril. So as a reminder, the reason why dataless is such a desirable option for a wallet is because it is fully trustless. What that means is it doesn't rely on any other backend node to validate transactions for it. Your dataless wallet actually runs a Cardano node underneath the hood and validates every single transaction for itself. There's a clear security benefit when compared to even some of our favorite wallets like Eternal or Nami or Flint wallet, but that trade-off is that really long syncing time where it has to sync and validate every single transaction. In this diagram here, we can see they kind of illustrate this by showing all of these full nodes all connecting and syncing to the network and coming to a consensus, and that's sort of the main idea of these trustless wallets, but they're really, really heavy. The main idea with Mithril is that instead of having to validate the whole blockchain from the beginning of time, you can instead have secure checkpoints. Think of them like in video games, like having a secure save point when you're playing your game. Every time you load the game up, you don't have to play the game again from the very beginning of the game. You just load it from your last save checkpoint. Mithril is looking at doing the same thing in a cryptographically secure way by having secure signatures and an aggregation of signatures, and those checkpoints can be used by light clients like your favorite light client in the browser, and then instead of having to validate and download the entire blockchain's history, it can pick up from the last checkpoint that it can cryptographically verify is secure and then move on from there. So the cool thing that they actually finally started digging into in this 360 is how Mithril is actually going to work. So is the first time we've gotten any insight into how it's actually going to come together and how these signatures will be put together and then how they would be propagated. So the way that they explained it is that these checkpoints are going to be comprised of a combination of signatures. These signatures are going to be actually taking bundles of transactions and signing that they're all right and then saying, okay, this all looks good in terms of the whole scope of the blockchain. Those signatures are going to be put together by stake pools, and your favorite stake pool operators will be able to participate in this process. And then the way that they're going to do in terms of who can sign what is it looks like what they're planning on doing is similar to, in the same way, how delegation to a stake pool and the size of the delegation dictates the amount of blocks that a stake pool gets. With Mithril, the plan is that the size of the stake pool's delegation is also going to dictate the amount of signatures that stake pool is allowed to sign. So for example, this pool that has more delegation to it will be able to make several different signatures for the Mithril protocol. This smaller pool will only do a couple, and this one is somewhere in between. So each pool will do an amount of signatures corresponding to its delegation size. And then from there, all of those signatures from all of those pools will all be put together by what's called the Mithril aggregator. So all of the signatures, let's say these 4 signatures came from one pool, these 2 were from another pool, these 3 were from another pool, and the aggregate of all of them represented a snapshot of the Cardano blockchain at that point in time. The Mithril aggregator would take all of these signatures, bundle them all together, and then create a verified snapshot that a light client can download and trust because it knows that it was put together by the same stake pools that we trust to verify the transactions on the network, and those are the ones that created the snapshot in a decentralized and a weighted average kind of way. In its first implementation, the aggregator is going to be centralized, probably run by IOHK themselves, and so the signers, the stake pools themselves, will work directly with this centralized aggregator, and then from there, the idea is that both the signatures and the aggregators will both be decentralized, similar to how we saw in the past, how there was all the stake pools were run by IOHK, and they slowly started dialing down the stake pools that they ran. And we saw more and more stake pools coming up from the community. Remember the big celebration that we had when D went down all the way to 0, signaling that all stake pools were now run by the community, and none of them were run by IOHK. There's a similar thing that we're expecting to see with Mithril and the aggregators, where it will start with IOHK running all of them, and then eventually with time, we'll see your favorite stake pool operators can serve as both signers and aggregators depending on the roles that they're going to fill. So a lot more detail that we're waiting to come out on this, but this is the first time we've had any kind of insight into what this is going to look like and some of the lower level details of how Mithril is actually going to work. This is going to be a huge step forward to unlock light clients, not only for the browser that can be trustless, but for mobile light clients. The only way they could ever be trustless is with something like Mithril, because there's no way realistically that your smartphone could download the entire blockchain. Without these kinds of secure snapshots, there's just no way moving forward for a real trustless light client. And we can't wait to hear more about this, and we'll share more with you as soon as we hear it. Later on in the show, we got some updates on the Vasil Hard Fork and the timeline associated with that. As a reminder, right now we are in the closed public testnet. At the end of May, they're planning on finalizing everything, and in early June, they're planning on sending it to the open and public Cardano testnet. And the goal is still currently, as of right now, that June 29th, at the boundary of Epoch 348, is when Vasil and the Hard Fork Combinator will go to mainnet, and we'll finally see the ability to utilize all of these different scalability improvements that we've been talking about on the mainnet. And as a reminder, to make sure that we have appropriate expectations here, as we talked about in detail last month, the Hard Fork itself will enable all these different improvements. But in order for us to really see and be able to consume the scalability improvements on the mainnet blockchain, all of your favorite dApps are going to have to incorporate this into their actual infrastructure and into their design. So we need to think of it in terms of, like, on June 29th is when the gates sort of open and allow your favorite developers access to these new features, but it's going to take a couple of days or weeks to start propagating through the network and really start feeling some of these performance improvements. Next, we got an update from John O'Connor and how things are going with the rollout in Ethiopia of using Atala Prism to roll out decentralized identity to 5 million students in Ethiopia. We talked about this way back last year. We're finally getting an update on how things are going. So they're currently onboarding both the students and the teachers. He said that this training is going to be happening over the next 8 weeks, the training and the onboarding. And their goal is by the end of the year to have between 1 and 2 million students utilizing Atala Prism, having their own decentralized identity on the Cardano blockchain. And then the idea is to have the full 5 million on board by the end of next year. So things are looking really good there. Looking forward to hearing more as the rollout actually happens. There was also an update on the peer-to-peer protocol. We're not going to go into much detail about this, but if you're interested in sort of like how the stake pools communicate with each other and the path forward on how this is going to get even more decentralized and how stake pools can truly just find each other with no help from any kind of central party, we recommend you check out this section. And finally, a couple of big events coming up. If you're in the Texas area, Consensus, one of the biggest blockchain events of the year, is happening in Austin, Texas from the 9th through the 12th, and Cardano is hosting a free event the day before on June 8th. So if you're anywhere nearby, you should definitely stop by the Palmer Events Center. They're gonna be hosting a big event there with a bunch of different sponsors. That should be a really good time. And if you can't make it to that, we look forward to seeing you on October 14th and 15th here in Denver, Colorado at the Rare Bloom event. This is going to be the first community-driven Cardano event. IOHK has no direct involvement. It is purely put together by the community. October 14th and 15th, we're going to drive on over. It's just down the street from us, and we'd love to see as many of you there as possible, so we're putting the date out there ahead of time. They covered it here in 360, which is really cool that they put it right next to the Consensus announcement. So if you can make it, look into it. We have links down below. There's also a discount code that Big Pay provided to get 10% off. Definitely let us know if you'll be able to join us here in October. We'd love to see all of you, and if nothing else, we'll see you next week.